Okay, let's get right into it. Today we're tearing into the latest earnings call from Bit Digital, that's ticker BTBT, and their Q3 report. Wow, it is a really fascinating one. You've got management telling this big story about a huge transformation, but then you look at the market and it seems like they're reading a completely different book. So let's dive in and figure out what's really going on here. And right away, this is the core puzzle we've got to solve. I mean, on one side, you see this massive GAAP profit, 47 cents per share. That is a huge number, mostly coming from, unrealized gains on their crypto. But then, you look at the other side. The stock gets hammered. It drops 17% in just the week after the call. So the big question is, what on earth did the market see that this huge profit number was hiding?
All right, so to get to the bottom of this, here's how we're going to break it down. First, we'll look at the Q3 report itself, which was kind of mixed. Then we're going to unpack management's huge pivot into Ethereum and AI. After that, we'll cover their guidance, figure out why the market gave it such a cold shoulder, and then we'll wrap up with our own take, what we think is coming next. All right, first up, the Q3 report. Let's dig into these headline numbers.
Okay, so this table really tells the story. Check it out. Revenue, it came in at $30.5 million, which is a small beat. Not bad. And that massive 47-cent GAAP profit? Well, almost all of that came from a $168 million paper gain on their Ethereum. But here's the kicker. Look at the non-GAAP number. This is the one that strips out those paper gains and shows you the real operating business. And it was a loss of 5 cents a share, a total miss. And you better believe that's the number traders zeroed in on.
And what's super interesting here is you can literally see the company changing before our eyes. Their cloud services business, that's their subsidiary, WhiteFiber, is now their biggest source of revenue. That's a huge deal. At the same time, their Ethereum staking revenue just exploded, up over 500% from last year. And you can see they're deliberately winding down the old Bitcoin mining business. So yeah, this is not the Bit Digital of a couple years ago, that's for sure.
Which brings us perfectly to the story management wants to tell. They're all about this new pivot to Ethereum and AI.
And this quote from the CEO, Sam Tabar, really puts it all in a nutshell. He's saying, hey, with Bit Digital, you get exposure to two of the biggest trends out there, the growth of Ethereum and the explosion in AI infrastructure through our company WhiteFiber. It's a really bold vision, and man, are they going after it aggressively.
And when I say aggressive, I mean it. Just look at this timeline. At the end of June, they had about 30,000 ETH. By the end of October, over 153,000. That's a 5x increase in just 4 months. They are absolutely all in on this Ethereum staking play.
So you might be asking, how did they pull this off so fast? Well, it was basically a three-step play. First, they IPO'd their AI business, WhiteFiber, which kind of put a real public value on it. Step 2, they went out and raised $150 million in unsecured notes, and that's super important. It's not backed by their ETH. Then, step 3, they took that cash and just plowed it right into buying more Ethereum for staking. Boom, boom, boom. A really clear, decisive move.
Okay, so what about the road ahead? What's management saying about the future?
Yeah, they gave a pretty clear roadmap. They said ETH staking is going to be the main engine from now on. They're shooting for yields of around 3%, plus, another 10 to 20% on top from some other strategies. They also promised to keep their total debt under 20% of their ETH holdings, phase out the rest of the BTC mining, and cut their corporate overhead. It's the classic playbook for a disciplined, ETH-focused yield company.
And check this out. This came up in the Q&A, and it's a really big deal. They were asked about their stake in WhiteFiber because the lockup period is ending. And management came right out and said they will not sell a single share of it in 2026. I mean, that is a massive vote of confidence. It tells you they think that AI business has a long, long way to run.
Okay, so you hear all that, the bold vision, the aggressive moves, the strong commitments. So why the heck did the stock get crushed?
Well, this chart gives you some really important context for that reaction. Look at the last year. The Bitcoin miners ETF, WGMI, is up almost 50%. And BTBT, it's down almost 50%. So you can imagine, investors are already frustrated. This has been a huge underperformer, and this earnings report just wasn't enough to change that narrative.
And the punishment was swift. The stock closed at $252 right before the call, and then just bled out over the next week all the way down to $209. That's a 17% haircut right after management spent an hour telling everyone how great the transformation is going.
So what gives? Why the big sell-off? Well, from what we can tell, the market basically focused on 4 key worries. First, that non-GAAP loss, that was a real problem. Second, people are a little nervous about them taking on $150 million in new debt, even if it is unsecured. Third, the whole crypto space was weak, and BTBT just got dragged down with it. And finally, that whole AI story with WhiteFiber, it's really compelling, but right now, it's a show-me story. The market wants to see actual contracts and revenue, not just the potential.
All right, so let's put this all together and land the plane. It's time for our take, what to watch for, where the stock might go, and our final rating.
Okay, first, our prediction for the next quarterly report. Here's the thing. Q3 didn't even reflect the full earning power of all that new ETH they bought. So, in Q4, we are finally going to see the full impact of having all 153,000 ETH staked for the entire quarter. We are absolutely expecting staking revenue to jump. That is the number to watch.
Now, what about the stock price? Honestly, we see a real tug-of-war here. On one side, the stock is probably going to struggle as long as the broader crypto market is under pressure. But on the other side, that huge stake in WhiteFiber acts as a kind of floor, and it's a massive long-term catalyst. The stock is just stuck right in the middle of those two forces.
And so all of that leads us to our final rating, which is market perform. Look, the management team has a really compelling story for the long run, but in the short term, the stock is fighting some serious headwinds and, let's be honest, a history of underperforming. Until they can prove this new model can deliver real, consistent results quarter after quarter, we think it's just going to trade in line with the rest of the market.
So, there you have it. That's our breakdown of Bit Digital's latest quarter. The real story here is this constant battle between a very bold new strategy and a very skeptical market. It's going to be fascinating to watch and see who wins out. And as always, remember, this is not financial advice.